The ER doors at Silvercrest Medical Center didn't burst open with the usual chaos of ambulance sirens and frantic paramedics. They slid apart with a mechanical whisper, and four men in dark civilian suits stepped through like they owned the building. No badges visible, no weapons showing. But the way they moved, synchronized, scanning exits, hands hovering near their jackets, screamed trained operators. Claire Donovan felt her pulse kick up before her brain caught up. She was wiping down a suture tray in Bay 3 when she caught sight of them through the glass partition. Every instinct honed over 2 tours in Kandahar told her these weren't cops, weren't federal agents playing by the book. They were hunters. And someone in this hospital was prey. The tallest one, buzzed hair, jawline like carved granite, locked eyes with the triage nurse and said one word that made Claire's blood run cold. Donovan. If you're still here, you're about to witness something most people never see. What happens when the person everyone underestimated becomes the only one who can save them all. Stay until the end of this story. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this journey has traveled. Hit that like button if you believe second chances are earned, not given. Now let's go back to where it all started falling apart. 17 hours earlier, Claire Donovan stood in front of hospital director Ethan Caldwell's desk, like a defendant awaiting sentencing. The office smelled like expensive coffee and furniture polish, the kind of sterile authority meant to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlook Seattle's skyline, rain streaking down the glass in lazy rivulets. Caldwell sat behind his desk with the posture of a man who'd never worked a double shift in his life, his tie knotted with surgical precision. Dr. Julian Cross leaned against the bookshelf to her right, arms crossed, wearing scrubs so crisp they might have been ironed. His expression carried that particular smugness of someone who'd never been wrong in a room full of witnesses. "Ms. Donovan," Caldwell began, not bothering with pleasantries. "Do you recall the night of March 14th? Claire kept her face neutral. She'd learned that skill in places where showing fear got people killed. "I recall every shift I work." "Then you remember treating a John Doe gunshot victim, 32-year-old male, single entry wound to the left shoulder." "I remember." Caldwell slid a file folder across the desk. Claire didn't touch it. "According to Dr. Cross's review of the toxicology reports, you administered atropine and pralidoxime without authorization, without consulting the attending physician, without any documented justification." Cross finally spoke, his voice carrying that lecturing tone he probably used on medical students. "Those are nerve agent antidotes, Ms. Donovan, not standard gunshot trauma protocol. Care to explain why you pumped experimental drugs into a patient based on what, exactly? A hunch?" Claire met his eyes. "I treated what you couldn't even recognize." The room temperature seemed to drop 5 degrees. "Excuse me?" Cross pushed off the bookshelf, jaw tight. The patient presented with pinpoint pupils, excessive salivation, muscle fasciculations. His vitals were deteriorating despite stable blood loss. "Those aren't gunshot symptoms. That's organophosphate poisoning." Caldwell's fingers drummed once against the desk. "You're not a toxicologist. You're not even a physician." "No, sir. I'm a nurse who's seen nerve agents in the field and recognized the signs before you're attending, chalked it up to shock and sent him to a morgue drawer." Cross laughed, short, sharp, derisive. "In the field. Right. You think 2 years at some VA clinic makes you qualified to override hospital protocol?" Claire said nothing. Let him think what he wanted. Most people at Silvercrest knew her as the quiet night shift nurse who kept to herself, never gossiped in the break room, never fought for promotions. What they didn't know could fill a classified file cabinet. Caldwell cleared his throat. "The patient recovered. We're not disputing that. But your methods were reckless. You violated chain of command, administered controlled substances without approval, and falsified documentation." "I documented everything after stabilization. Standard emergency procedure when immediate intervention is required. Standard for a combat medic, maybe." Cross's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Not for a civilian nurse in a level 2 trauma center. This is in Afghanistan, Donovan. We have rules." The Afghan reference landed like a slap, but Claire's expression didn't flicker. If Cross was fishing, she wasn't biting. Caldwell folded his hands. Given the irregularities, we're placing you on immediate suspension pending full investigation. 2 weeks, unpaid. If the board finds your actions constituted gross negligence, termination will follow. Claire absorbed the words like body blows. Rent was due in 5 days. Her sister's nursing home bills didn't pause for bureaucratic witch hunts. Understood, she said quietly. You'll surrender your badge and access card before leaving the building. Caldwell's tone suggested the meeting was over. HR will contact you regarding the hearing. Claire pulled her hospital ID from the lanyard around her neck, placed it on the desk with the same care she'd used setting down a live grenade, and walked out without another word. The hallway outside Caldwell's office felt like a gauntlet. 2 surgical nurses stopped mid-conversation as she passed, their whispers chasing her like gnats. The rumor mill at Silvercrest ran faster than the IV pumps. By now, half the hospital probably knew she'd been called upstairs. By tomorrow, they'd have invented 3 different versions of why. Claire took the stairs instead of the elevator, 8 flights down to the ER level, muscle memory guiding her feet while her mind spun through options. She could fight this, file a grievance, demand the board review the patient outcome instead of protocol semantics. But fighting meant attention. Attention meant questions. Questions meant people digging into a past she'd spent 3 years burying. She hit the ground floor and pushed through the stairwell door into the familiar chaos of the ER. Friday night, 11 p.m. The waiting room overflowed with the usual suspects: drunk college kids, elderly chest pains, a screaming toddler with a fever. Ambulance bay radios crackled with incoming traumas. Home. The only place that made sense anymore. Donovan! The charge nurse, Rita Vasquez, waved her over with the frantic energy of someone drowning in triage. Rita had worked Silvercrest ER for 20 years, had seen every flavor of human disaster, and treated everyone from janitors to CEOs with the same no-bullshit efficiency. Thank God. I've got 3 beds holding, 2 more coming in hot, and Jackson called out sick. I need you on... Can't. Claire kept walking toward the lockers. I'm suspended. Rita's face went from harried to horrified in half a second. What? Since when? Since about 3 minutes ago. That's insane. You're one of the best nurses we have. What happened? Claire pulled open her locker, started emptying the contents into her bag. Spare scrubs, protein bars, the battered paperback she never had time to read. Politics happened. Cross. Rita spat the name like a curse. That pompous jackass has been gunning for you since you corrected him in front of the residents last month. Probably didn't help. Screw him, and screw Caldwell for letting this happen. Rita lowered her voice. You know half the docs upstairs can't diagnose their way out of a paper bag without 3 consults and a CT scan. You actually save lives. Apparently I saved them wrong. Claire, it's fine, Rita. Really. Claire zipped her bag, slammed the locker shut. I'll figure it out. She turned to leave, and the entire ER went silent. Not the usual organized chaos quiet of a brief lull between traumas. This was different, unnatural, the kind of silence that raised hackles. Claire looked up. The 4 men in suits stood just inside the ambulance bay entrance, still as statues, scanning the room with the systematic precision of trained operators clearing a hostile space. The tallest one, the one with the buzzed hair and granite jaw, held up a slim leather credential case, though he didn't bother opening it. We're looking for Claire Donovan, he said. Not loud. Didn't need to be. Every head in the ER swiveled toward her. Claire's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her breathing steady. Rule 1 from Kandahar: never let them see panic. That's me, she said evenly. Buzzcut gestured toward the trauma bay hallway. We need a moment of your time, somewhere private. Rita stepped forward, protective. Who the hell are you people? You can't just walk into my ER and... It's okay, Rita. Claire kept her eyes on the men. She recognized the stance, the economy of movement. These weren't cops playing dress-up. They were operators, and they'd come specifically for her. Let's talk. She led them down the hallway to Bay 6, the isolation room usually reserved for infectious cases. Empty tonight. She pulled the door shut behind them, noting automatically that the tallest one positioned himself between her and the exit while the other 3 fanned out. Classic containment formation. You want to tell me what this is about? Claire asked. Buzzcut reached into his jacket, slow, deliberate, and pulled out a photograph, slid it across the exam table between them. Claire looked down at the image and felt the floor tilt slightly under her feet. It was a hospital photo, patient on a gurney. Face she recognized instantly, even though she'd only seen it for 90 frantic minutes 4 months ago. The John Doe gunshot victim. The one Crossan Caldwell had just raked her over the coals for treating. His name is Staff Sergeant Luke Hayes, Buzzcut said. United States Army Special Operations. And according to every database in existence, he died in that ER 4 months ago. Claire's mouth went dry. He walked out of here 3 days after admission. Officially, he was DOA, pronounced dead at 23:47 hours. Death certificate filed. Next of kin notified. Closed casket funeral at Arlington 2 weeks later. Buzzcut leaned forward slightly. Except here's the interesting part, Ms. Donovan. Staff Sergeant Hayes is standing right behind you. Claire spun. The man in the corner, shorter than the others, maybe 5'10", athletic build under the suit, stepped into the light. She recognized him instantly. Same face, same scar along his left cheekbone. But alive, breathing. Watching her with eyes that had seen the same kind of hell she had. Ms. Donovan, Hayes said quietly, you saved my life. Claire's brain scrambled to process. You were poisoned. Nerve agent exposure, likely VX or something close. I treated the symptoms, but... You didn't guess, Hayes interrupted. You knew, recognized it immediately, administered the exact antidote protocol without hesitation. He paused. How? The question hung in the air like a blade. Claire felt the walls closing in. These men weren't here by accident. They'd done homework, pulled threads she'd spent years trying to bury. Lucky guess, she said carefully. Bullshit. The word came from one of the other men, shorter, wiry, with a Boston accent. Organophosphate poisoning presents almost identically to hypovolemic shock in early stages. Most ER docs miss it. You called it in under 2 minutes. Claire said nothing. Buzzcut spoke again. We pulled your personnel file, Ms. Donovan. Bachelor's in nursing from University of Washington. 2 years at Seattle VA. 3 years here at Silvercrest. No military service listed. No specialized toxicology training. No combat medical experience. Then I guess I'm just good at my job. Or, Hayes said softly, your file is incomplete. The silence stretched. Claire could feel her pulse in her temples. These men had clearance, resources. They'd found her anyway, despite the redactions, the closed records, the deliberately erased trail. What do you want? She asked finally. Hayes glanced at Buzzcut, some unspoken communication passing between them. Then he stepped closer, lowering his voice. 4 months ago, I was on a black op in Eastern Europe. Target was a weapons facility developing next-gen chemical agents. Intel was solid. Insertion went smooth. But someone inside fed bad information. The facility was a trap. My team got hit with an experimental nerve compound our medics had never seen. 3 of us made it out. Barely. He touched his shoulder where the bullet scar would be. Gunshot was a cover story. Entry wound looked convincing enough for a hospital admit. But the real damage was the poison. It's designed to mimic other conditions. Shock, cardiac arrest, even allergic reaction. Kills slowly. Untraceable if the victim dies before proper testing. Claire's hands felt cold. So someone wanted you dead and tried to make it look natural. Exactly. And it would have worked if you hadn't seen through the bullshit. Hayes met her eyes. You administered atropine and 2-PAM like you'd treated nerve agents 100 times before. No hesitation. No second guessing. That's not luck, Ms. Donovan. That's training. Maybe I just read the right textbook. Or maybe, Buzzcut said, you served 2 tours as a combat medic with the 75th Ranger Regiment under a different name, earned a Bronze Star for pulling wounded soldiers out of a firefight in Helmand Province, and disappeared from the Army's records 3 years ago under circumstances even we can't fully access. The words hit like artillery fire. Claire forced herself to breathe. That's a hell of a story. It's not a story, Hayes said. It's the truth. And the people who tried to kill me know it now too. Ice flooded Claire's veins. What? Your hospital director, Ethan Caldwell. 2 weeks ago, he filed a complaint with the state medical board about unauthorized drug administration. That complaint got flagged by a federal database monitoring nerve agent antidote usage, which triggered an investigation, which meant people started asking questions about you. Buzzcut picked up the thread. Caldwell didn't mean to do it. He's just a bureaucrat covering his ass. But his audit created a paper trail, and that trail led back to a black op that's supposed to be erased from existence. You became a loose end. Claire's chest tightened. Who knows? The people who built the facility we raided, the ones who want Hayes dead and anyone connected to that night buried with him. Hayes's voice was grim. They've got resources, Ms. Donovan. Money, connections. And as of 6 hours ago, they know your name. One of the other men, silent until now, older, with graying temples, spoke up. We've got credible intel that a hit squad left Frankfurt this morning. They'll be in Seattle by dawn. Claire stared at him. You're saying someone's coming to kill me because I did my job? We're saying someone's coming to kill you because you're proof their weapon failed. Hayes stepped closer. You didn't just save my life. You exposed a flaw in a billion-dollar weapons system. They can't let that stand. The room felt like it was shrinking. Claire had spent 3 years building a quiet life. No attention, no complications. Just work, rent, and visits to her sister's care facility. And now, because she'd trusted her instincts in an ER bay, because she'd seen the signs that others missed, because she couldn't walk away from someone dying on her watch, she was back in the crosshairs. What do you want from me? She asked again, quieter this time. Buzzcut straightened. We're taking you into protective custody, safe house outside the city. Full security detail until we neutralize the threat. And if I say no, then you're on your own against professionals who've already killed 6 people to protect this secret. Hayes didn't blink. How long do you think you'd last? Claire wanted to argue, wanted to tell them she could handle herself, but the truth was simpler and uglier. She was a nurse, not a soldier anymore. She had no weapons, no backup, no resources beyond a paycheck that just got suspended. She was exactly the kind of target these people ate for breakfast. How long? She asked. Until we confirm the threat is contained. Could be days, could be weeks. Claire thought of her sister, the bills, the life she'd carefully constructed. I need to make arrangements. My sister's in a care home. She needs... We'll handle it, Buzzcut said. Everything. You just need to come with us. Now. Something in his tone made Claire's instincts flare. These men were professional, capable, but there was an urgency underneath the calm that felt like more than just standard operational procedure. What aren't you telling me? She asked. Hayes and Buzzcut exchanged another look, longer this time. The hit squad, Hayes said slowly. They're not coming tomorrow. They're already here. Claire's blood turned to slush. What? Facial recognition pinged 2 known operatives at SeaTac Airport 90 minutes ago. They're en route. And their first stop? The emergency alert system shrieked to life overhead, drowning out his words. The hospital-wide PA crackled. Code Silver. All personnel code Silver. Active shooter in the building. This is not a drill. Gunfire erupted somewhere on the floor above them, screaming, running footsteps. Buzzcut swore, already pulling a weapon from his shoulder holster. They're here. Hayes grabbed Claire's arm. We need to move, now. But Claire was already in motion, her body shifting into combat mode before her brain caught up. She crossed to the supply cabinet, yanked it open, grabbed a trauma kit. Ms. Donovan, we don't have time. There are patients in this ER. She turned, meeting Hayes' eyes with the same steel she'd learned in Kandahar. And I don't leave people behind. More gunfire. Closer now. Bay 4's door exploded inward, glass spraying across the hallway. A man in black tactical gear stepped through, rifle raised, scanning for targets. His eyes locked on Claire. And everything she'd buried for 3 years came roaring back to life. The gunman's rifle swung toward Claire, but Hayes was already moving. He fired twice, controlled bursts that punched through the tactical vest shoulder gap. The shooter staggered backward into the hallway, and Buzzcut was on him in seconds, kicking the rifle away and putting 2 more rounds center mass. Claire's hands didn't shake. That surprised her. 3 years away from combat, and her body remembered everything. The tunnel vision, the slowed perception of time, the way fear became fuel instead of paralysis. Bay 2 has 6 patients, she said, voice steady. 3 ambulatory, 3 bedbound. Rita's got the triage desk with maybe 20 civilians in the waiting room. Hayes stared at her like he was seeing someone completely different. You want to run that by me again? I'm not leaving them. Ms. Donovan, these men are professionals. They're here to kill you specifically. Every second you stay puts more people at risk. Then we move fast. Claire grabbed the trauma kit, slinging it over her shoulder. You wanted to know if I have combat medical experience? You're about to find out. Another explosion rocked the floor above. The lights flickered. Somewhere down the hall, someone screamed. Buzzcut checked his weapon. Captain Reed's going to have my ass for this. Who's Captain Reed? Claire asked. The man who's going to court-martial me for letting a civilian run toward gunfire. But Buzzcut was already moving toward the door, weapon raised. Stay behind me. Touch nothing. Do exactly what I say. They moved into the hallway as a unit. Claire fell into formation automatically. Center position, head down, letting the operators clear corners. The muscle memory came back like riding a bike, except the bike was soaked in adrenaline, and the road was carpeted with broken glass. Bay 2's door hung open, hinges twisted. Inside, Claire could see patients huddled on the floor. A nurse, young, maybe 25, crouched over an elderly man having a seizure. Clear left, one of the operators called. Claire moved in. The young nurse looked up, face streaked with tears. They came through looking for someone. They shot Dr. Brennan. He's... Focus on me. Claire knelt beside her, checking the seizing patient's airway. What's his name? Mr. Patterson. He's got a history of epilepsy, but the gunfire triggered... Get me 5 milligrams of Ativan, now! The young nurse scrambled for the med cart while Claire positioned Patterson on his side, protecting his head. The seizure was slowing, but his breathing was shallow. She checked his oxygen saturation, 82%. Not good. Ambu bag, she called out. Hayes appeared at her elbow, holding the bag valve mask like he'd done this before. You want me to bag him? Claire blinked. You know how? Special Forces medic training. I'm not as good as you, but I can keep someone breathing. He positioned the mask, started squeezing the bag in rhythm. What else? Get these people out. Service corridor behind the radiology department leads to the parking garage. 2 floors down, exit on the northwest corner. Buzzcut appeared in the doorway. We've got movement on the east stairwell. At least 3 more hostiles heading this way. How long? Claire asked, still working on Patterson. 2 minutes. Maybe less. The young nurse returned with the Ativan. Claire administered it, watching Patterson's vitals stabilize. The seizure stopped. His oxygen came up to 90%. Can he walk? Hayes asked. Not safely. We need a wheelchair. No time. Hayes handed the ambu bag to the young nurse, then scooped Patterson up in a fireman's carry like the man weighed nothing. Lead the way. Claire turned to the other patients. 2 were already mobile, helping each other toward the door. The third was a teenage girl with a broken leg, sitting in a wheelchair, eyes wide with terror. What's your name? Claire asked. Sophie. Okay, Sophie, I need you to hold on to this. Claire handed her a flashlight from the trauma kit. You're going to light the path for everyone behind you. Can you do that? Sophie nodded, gripping the flashlight like a lifeline. They moved as a group into the corridor. Buzzcut took point, his weapon sweeping the darkness ahead. The hospital's backup generators had kicked in, but the lighting was sporadic, patches of harsh fluorescent interrupted by stretches of shadow. Behind them, gunfire erupted again. Closer this time. Move, move, Buzzcut hissed. They reached the radiology corridor just as the first hostile appeared at the far end of the hallway. He raised his rifle, and Buzzcut fired first. The shooter went down hard, but the gunfire had given away their position. They know where we are, Hayes said grimly, still carrying Patterson. We're not making it to the garage. Claire's mind raced, mapping the hospital layout from memory. Then it clicked. Imaging suite, 2 doors down on the left, lead-lined walls, only 1 entrance. That's a kill box, one of the other operators said. It's also the only place in this wing that can stop rifle rounds. Claire was already pushing Sophie's wheelchair toward the door. We hold there until help arrives. They piled into the CT imaging suite, and Buzzcut slammed the door shut. The room was small, cramped, dominated by the massive scanner in the center. Medical equipment lined the walls. One tiny observation window looked out into the corridor. Hayes set Patterson down gently on the floor. The elderly man was breathing better now, though still unconscious. The young nurse, her name tag read Amber, checked his pulse with shaking hands. "How long can we hold this position?" Claire asked. Buzzcut examined the door. "The lock's electronic, dead without power. And this is a medical suite, not a bunker. They'll breach it in under a minute if they want to." "So we make them not want to." Claire crossed to the equipment lockers, yanking them open. Gauze, bandages, syringes. And there, oxygen tanks, 6 of them, full cylinders lined up like soldiers. Hayes saw what she was looking at and swore softly. "You're kidding. You got a better idea? Those are medical-grade tanks. They'll burn hot enough if you give them the right spark." Claire grabbed 2 tanks, positioning them near the door. "Help me move these." The other operators exchanged glances but followed her lead. Within 90 seconds, they'd created a makeshift barricade, oxygen tanks stacked in a semicircle, pressurized containers turned into improvised explosives. "If they breach," Claire said, "we rupture the tanks and ignite the oxygen. The explosion will blow back into the corridor." Buzzcut stared at her. "That'll kill anyone in the hallway." "That's the point. You're talking about turning a medical suite into a bomb." Claire met his eyes. "I'm talking about keeping these people alive. You got a problem with that?" Before he could answer, voices echoed from the corridor, hard, professional, speaking in clipped German. Hayes translated quietly. "They're sweeping room by room. They know we're here." Sophie whimpered. Amber wrapped an arm around her, trying to muffle the sound. Claire moved to the observation window, peering through the narrow glass. She counted 4 hostiles in the corridor, full tactical gear, suppressed rifles, moving with the kind of coordination that came from serious training. "They're not here for a firefight," she whispered. "They're here for a clean execution." "You," Buzzcut corrected. "They're here for you." Claire watched the shooters advance. Then an idea hit her, reckless, insane, probably suicidal. But it might work. "Give me your radio," she said to Buzzcut. "What?" "Your radio. Now." He unclipped it from his vest, handed it over. Claire turned the volume up, then switched it to an open frequency. She took a breath and spoke clearly into the receiver. "This is Claire Donovan. I know you're looking for me. I'm in the CT imaging suite, East Wing, 2nd floor. Come get me." Hayes grabbed her arm. "What the hell are you doing?" "Giving them what they want." Claire set the radio down on the equipment cart, still broadcasting. Then she turned to the others. "Everyone out. Service duct in the ceiling leads to the maintenance crawl space. You can get to the stairwell from there." "We're not leaving you," Amber said. "Yes, you are. Because if they think I'm alone, they'll focus on this room. That gives you time to run." Buzzcut shook his head. "This is insane. This is tactical. They want me dead, so I'm offering myself as bait while you evacuate the patients." "And when they breach?" Hayes demanded. Claire glanced at the oxygen tanks. "I'll make it expensive." The operators didn't move. Claire could see the calculation in their eyes. Protocols, orders, the weight of civilian casualties versus mission objectives. "Please," she said quietly, "I didn't spend 2 tours in Kandahar saving lives just to watch people die because I'm in the room. Get them out." Something in her voice must have landed because Hayes nodded slowly. 2 minutes. You hold for 2 minutes, then you follow us out. That's the deal." "Deal." They moved fast. Hayes boosted Sophie up into the ceiling duct first, wheelchair abandoned. Amber followed with Patterson slung between 2 of the operators. Within 90 seconds, the room was empty except for Claire, and the radio still broadcasting her voice on loop. She could hear the shooters in the corridor now, boots on linoleum, the metallic click of weapons being readied. Claire positioned herself behind the CT scanner, hands resting on the oxygen tank valve. Her heart hammered, but her breathing stayed controlled. This was just another firefight. Just another moment where the difference between living and dying came down to timing and nerve. The door handle turned. Claire waited. The door swung open slowly. A rifle barrel appeared first, then a figure in black tactical gear. He scanned the room, spotted the radio on the cart, and signaled to someone behind him. 2 more shooters entered. They moved efficiently, checking corners, confirming the space was clear except for 1 target. The lead shooter saw Claire and raised his weapon. She didn't wait for him to fire. She twisted the oxygen tank valve, then kicked it hard toward the doorway. The tank shot forward like a missile, pressurized gas screaming out the ruptured seal. The shooters scattered, and in that half-second of confusion, Claire grabbed the second tank and hurled it at the doorframe. It hit the metal with a shower of sparks from the exposed electrical panel she'd deliberately left uncovered. The oxygen ignited. The explosion wasn't Hollywood dramatic, no massive fireball, no shockwave that threw bodies across the room. But it was enough. A concentrated blast of superheated gas that turned the doorway into a wall of flame. The shooters staggered back, gear smoking, and Claire was already moving. She bolted for the ceiling duct, grabbed the edge, pulled herself up with strength born from pure survival instinct. Below her, the fire spread to the medical supplies. Alcohol swabs, paper gowns, anything flammable. Smoke filled the room fast. Claire crawled through the duct, metal groaning under her weight. She could hear shouting behind her, the crackle of flames, the hiss of the fire suppression system kicking in too late. The duct opened into a maintenance crawl space barely 3 feet high. Claire dragged herself forward, following the path the others had taken. Her lungs burned, her shoulders screamed from the awkward position, but she kept moving. She emerged into a service stairwell just as Hayes grabbed her arm and hauled her to her feet. "You're insane," he said. "You're welcome." They descended 2 flights before the building's emergency system started blaring again. Not gunfire this time. Something worse. The entire hospital was being evacuated. They hit the ground floor and found chaos. Hospital security was trying to organize the exodus. Patients, staff, visitors, all pouring toward the exits in a panicked mass. Police lights strobed through the windows. SWAT teams were setting up perimeters. And standing in the middle of the lobby, looking like someone had just ruined his entire decade, was Director Ethan Caldwell. He spotted Claire immediately. His face went from pale to crimson in seconds. "You!" he snarled, pushing through the crowd. "This is your fault. Those men came here looking for you." Claire opened her mouth, but Hayes stepped between them. "Sir, you need to step back." "I need to step back? My hospital is under attack because of her." Caldwell jabbed a finger at Claire. "She brought this here. She saved 6 lives in the last 10 minutes while you were hiding in your office." Hayes' voice carried the kind of authority that made even bureaucrats shut up. "So, unless you want to explain to federal investigators why you ignored protocols that could have prevented this, I suggest you back off." Caldwell's jaw worked soundlessly. Then Dr. Julian Cross appeared at his shoulder, looking disheveled and terrified, but still managing to sneer. "Of course she's in the middle of this," Cross said. "I told you she was reckless. I told you she'd bring trouble." "Trouble?" Rita Vasquez materialized out of the crowd like an avenging angel, still wearing her blood-spattered scrubs. "She just pulled half my ER out of a war zone while you were probably crying in a supply closet." Cross bristled. "I was treating patients. You were nowhere. I checked." Rita turned to Caldwell. "And you suspended her this morning for saving a life. How's that working out for you?" More police flooded through the entrance. A SWAT commander started barking orders, establishing a command post in the lobby. And through the crowd, Claire saw someone else approaching. A man in a dark suit, older than the operators who'd found her, with silver hair and the kind of face that had seen too many classified briefings. He walked straight to Hayes and Buzzcut. "Status?" "4 hostiles neutralized, Captain Reed," Buzzcut reported. "Civilian casualties unknown. Primary asset is secure." Captain Reed's eyes shifted to Claire. "Ms. Donovan." "That's me. You just turned a hospital into a combat zone." They started it. Something that might have been amusement flickered across Reed's face. "So I heard. You also save multiple lives using improvised explosives and tactical knowledge that's not supposed to exist in your file." Claire said nothing. Reed glanced at Caldwell and Cross, who were still standing there looking like they'd swallowed glass. "Gentlemen, I'm going to need statements from both of you, specifically about the complaint you filed 2 weeks ago that triggered a federal database alert." Caldwell went even paler. "I don't understand. You filed a report about unauthorized drug administration. That report mentioned nerve agent antidotes, which flagged an ongoing classified investigation, which means you just accidentally exposed a black operations cover and put a federal asset at risk." Reed's tone could have frozen nitrogen. "So yes, Director Caldwell, We're going to have a very long conversation about protocols. Cross tried to slip away, but one of the SWAT officers blocked his path. Dr. Cross, isn't it? Reed consulted a tablet one of his people handed him. You co-signed the complaint. You also accessed classified patient files without authorization and discussed details of a sealed case with at least 3 staff members, violating federal confidentiality laws. I was doing my job, Cross stammered. You were covering your ego. There's a difference. Reed nodded to the officer. Detain them both for questioning. Caldwell started to protest, but the officer was already escorting him toward the police perimeter. Cross followed, his face a mask of barely controlled panic. Rita watched them go with visible satisfaction. That's the best thing I've seen all year. Reed turned back to Claire. We need to move you to a secure location. The threat's not contained yet. There were 4 shooters in the hospital, Claire said. You said you neutralized 4. That means we got the breach team. But intelligence suggests there's a secondary unit still in the city. Reed gestured toward the exit, where 3 black SUVs waited, engines running. We're taking you to a federal safe house until we confirm the operation's been shut down. Claire looked at the hospital, her hospital, burning and bleeding, crawling with cops and terrified people. 3 years she'd worked here. 3 years of quiet, careful anonymity, all gone in one night. What about my sister? She asked quietly. She's in a memory care facility on the north side. If they know about me, already handled. We've got a team securing her location now. Reed's expression softened slightly. Ms. Donovan, I know this isn't what you wanted, but the moment you saved Staff Sergeant Hayes, you became part of something bigger than a hospital job. These people won't stop until you're dead or they're in the ground. So what are you offering? Witness protection? A new identity? I'm offering you a choice. Reed held her gaze. Come with us. Let us keep you safe until this blows over, and then you can go back to whatever life you want. Or you stop running from who you are and help us finish this. Claire felt the weight of the words. She'd spent 3 years trying to bury her past, pretend she was just a civilian nurse with no blood on her hands and no ghosts in her head. But tonight had proved what she'd always suspected. You didn't walk away from that life. It just waited for the right moment to drag you back. What would helping you look like? She asked. Reed glanced at Hayes. The facility that produced the nerve agent used on Sergeant Hayes is still operational. We've identified the location, but we need someone who understands the chemical compound to help us analyze their security protocols and medical countermeasures. Someone with your specific skill set. I'm a nurse, not a spy. You're a combat medic with field experience in chemical weapons, and the only person in the country who successfully treated this particular agent. That makes you invaluable. Claire looked at Hayes, who nodded slowly. It's voluntary, but we could use you. And after? After you're clear, full protection, new records if you want them, clean slate. It was everything she'd wanted 3 years ago when she first disappeared from the Army's databases. A chance to actually be free instead of just hiding. But something in Reed's expression told her there was more to the offer. What aren't you telling me? She asked. Reed hesitated. Then he pulled out his tablet again, brought up a photo, and handed it to her. Claire looked at the image and felt her stomach drop. It was a surveillance photo, grainy and dark, but unmistakable. A woman in medical scrubs standing outside a building Claire didn't recognize. The woman's face was partially obscured, but her posture, her build, it was Claire. Except Claire had never been to that location in her life. This was taken 6 days ago in Prague, Reed said quietly, at a known meeting point for black market weapons dealers. Facial recognition flagged it as 92% match to you. Claire's hands felt numb. That's not me. We know. But someone went to significant effort to make it look like you, which means this isn't just about cleaning up loose ends from Hayes' operation. Someone's setting you up as a scapegoat. The pieces clicked together in Claire's mind with sickening clarity. The suspension, the complaint, the data breach that exposed her to the hit squad. It wasn't collateral damage. It was deliberate. Someone wanted her visible, exposed, and then framed for treason before she could defend herself. Who? She asked. That's what we need to find out. But whoever it is, they have access to classified databases, military records, and enough resources to fake surveillance footage and deploy international hit teams. Reed met her eyes. This goes higher than we thought, and you're at the center of it. Claire looked around at the chaos. The hospital in flames, the terrified people, the operators standing guard, Rita watching from the crowd with worry etched in every line of her face. 3 years ago, she'd walked away because she couldn't carry the weight anymore. Couldn't watch one more friend die. Couldn't patch one more wound knowing the war would just make 10 more. But walking away hadn't saved her. It had just delayed the inevitable. "Okay," she said finally. "I'm in." Reed nodded. "Good. We leave in 5 minutes. Grab whatever you need." Claire turned to Rita, who pushed through the crowd to pull her into a tight hug. "You come back," Rita said fiercely. "I don't care what federal bullshit you're wrapped up in. You come back." "I will. And when you do, you're getting that promotion to charge nurse, whether Caldwell likes it or not." Claire managed to smile. "He might be in federal prison by then. Even better." They separated, and Claire followed Reed toward the SUVs. Hayes fell into step beside her. "You sure about this?" he asked quietly. "No, but I'm tired of running." They reached the vehicles just as one of Reed's men jogged up, phone pressed to his ear. His face was grim. "Captain, we've got a problem. The team securing Donovan's sister just reported in. The facility's been breached." Claire's heart stopped. "What?" "Armed subjects entered the building 12 minutes ago. They're holding the staff hostage, and they're asking for you by name." The world tilted. Claire grabbed the SUV's door handle to steady herself. "How many hostages?" 43. Patients and staff. "My sister is one of them." The operator's voice was flat, professional, delivering nightmare fuel like a weather report. "They've issued an ultimatum. You have 2 hours to present yourself or they start executing people." Reed swore. "This is a trap. They know we'll never send her in." "Then what's the play?" Hayes demanded. Claire didn't wait for an answer. She yanked open the SUV door and climbed inside. "Donovan, wait. Drive," she told the operator behind the wheel. "I'm not negotiating. I'm not waiting for a tactical solution. My sister is in that building, and I'm getting her out." Reed leaned into the vehicle. "Ms. Donovan, I understand your emotional response, but this isn't emotion. This is strategy." Claire's voice was cold, controlled, every bit the combat medic who'd earned a Bronze Star under fire. "They want me? Fine. I'll give them exactly what they're asking for. And when they let their guard down, we end this." Reed studied her for a long moment. Then he climbed into the SUV beside her. "Hayes, Garrett, Martinez, you're with me. Everyone else, secondary perimeter. Let's move." The SUVs peeled out of the hospital parking lot, sirens screaming into the Seattle night. Through the rear window, Claire watched Silvercrest Medical Center recede into the distance. Burning, broken, probably done with her forever. But she wasn't looking back anymore. She was looking ahead, at the memory care facility where her sister sat trapped with 42 other innocent people, and at the men who'd made the fatal mistake of thinking Claire Donovan was still the kind of person who would sacrifice others to save herself. They were about to learn otherwise. The SUV carved through Seattle traffic like a blade, emergency lights strobing across rain-slicked asphalt. Claire sat wedged between Reed and Hayes, her mind running tactical calculations she hadn't touched in 3 years. The memory care facility, Riverside Haven, was a converted Victorian mansion on the north edge of the city. 3 stories, 28 rooms, limited exits. She'd toured it 6 times before moving her sister there. She knew every hallway, every door, every window that didn't open because of safety protocols designed to keep dementia patients from wandering. Protocols that now made everyone inside a captive audience. "What's the layout?" Reed asked, pulling up building schematics on his tablet. "Main entrance faces east, staff entrance on the south side, emergency exit in the kitchen that leads to the garden. 3 floors. Ground level's the common areas, dining room, activity center, nurses' station. Second and third are patient rooms." Claire's voice stayed flat, clinical. If she let herself think about her sister trapped in there, she'd lose focus. "There's a service elevator, but it's loud as hell. You'd hear it from anywhere in the building. Security cameras? 8, main entrance, both stairwells, nurses' station, and 4 in the hallways. All feed to a monitoring room behind the front desk." Hayes pulled up tactical maps on his own device. "How many staff on night shift?" 6. 2 nurses, 3 care assistants, 1 overnight supervisor. Claire's jaw tightened. They're not security. They're people who give medications and help patients to the bathroom. They won't know what to do against armed hostiles. The operator driving, Garrett, built like a linebacker with a shaved head and Brooklyn accent, glanced in the rearview mirror. FBI's establishing a perimeter 2 blocks out. SWAT's en route, but they're saying minimum 45 minutes before they're ready to breach. We don't have 45 minutes, Claire said. Reed's phone buzzed. He answered, listened, his expression darkening. Understood. Keep me updated. He hung up and met Claire's eyes. They just sent proof of life. Video feed shows 12 hostages in the dining room, 28 patients still in their rooms, 3 staff members unaccounted for. My sister? Room 312, 3rd floor. She's not in the group downstairs. That should have been relief, but it just twisted the knot in Claire's stomach tighter. Her sister Sarah had early onset Alzheimer's, diagnosed at 43, deteriorating fast. On good days, she remembered Claire's name. On bad days, she thought Claire was their mother, dead 15 years now. The idea of Sarah confused and terrified while armed men stormed through the building made Claire's hands curl into fists. What's the play? She asked Reed. We negotiate. Buy time for SWAT to position. Standard hostage protocol. They're not interested in negotiation. This is about me, so let me go in. Absolutely not. Captain, they've got 43 people, and sending you in gets 44 bodies instead of 43. Reed's tone left no room for argument. These men are professionals. They didn't take that facility to trade hostages for you. They took it to kill you in front of witnesses and make it look like you started the violence. It's a setup. Hayes leaned forward. He's right. You walk through that door, they execute you on camera and claim self-defense. Then they kill the hostages anyway to eliminate witnesses. Claire knew they were right, knew the tactical logic was sound, but logic didn't account for the image burned into her brain. Sarah sitting in her room, scared and alone, waiting for someone who might never come. Then what? She asked quietly. We wait outside while they murder people to prove a point? Reed's expression was grim. We find another way in. The SUVs pulled up 2 blocks from Riverside Haven, parking behind a mobile command unit that FBI had already established. Agents swarmed the area, setting up perimeters, establishing sight lines, coordinating with local PD. It was organized chaos, and Claire hated every second of it. She climbed out of the vehicle and immediately spotted the facility in the distance, lights blazing in every window, visible even through the rain. It looked peaceful, normal. Like someone's grandmother lived there, not like a war zone. An FBI negotiator approached Reed, hand extended. Captain Reed, Special Agent Victoria Mills, I'm running point on negotiation. Status? Reed asked, skipping pleasantries. They've made contact twice, both times demanding Claire Donovan's presence. No other terms, no demands for money or transport. Just her. Mills glanced at Claire. You're the asset? I'm the target, Claire corrected. Either way, protocol's the same. We don't send civilians into active hostage situations, period. How long can you stall them? Maybe an hour before they escalate, maybe less. Mills pulled up a tablet showing thermal imaging of the building. We're tracking 17 signatures inside, 12 clustered in the dining room, 5 spread through the 2nd and 3rd floors. The rest of the patients are in their rooms, but we can't get accurate counts because of the building's insulation. Claire studied the thermal scan. The 5 spread out, they're guards, watching the stairwells and monitoring the rooms. The 12 in the dining room are hostages with maybe 2 or 3 armed subjects controlling them. Mills raised an eyebrow. You have tactical training? I've seen this before. Reed interrupted. Claire, I need you to stay here. Let us handle this. While you handle it, people are going to die. People are going to die if we rush in blind. Reed's voice was firm but not unkind. I know you want to help. But the best thing you can do right now is give us intel and stay out of the line of fire. Claire wanted to argue, wanted to grab a weapon and storm the building herself. But Reed was right. Going in hot would get everyone killed. So she forced herself to think tactically instead of emotionally. The patients on the 2nd and 3rd floors, she said slowly. Most of them have moderate to severe dementia. They won't understand what's happening. If the shooting starts, they'll panic, wander into hallways. Some of them will try to leave their rooms. Mills nodded, which makes them collateral damage. Unless we evacuate them first, How? The building's locked down. Looked at the thermal imaging again, an idea forming. The service elevator. It's slow and loud, but it opens directly into the kitchen. If you can create a distraction at the front of the building, I can use the kitchen emergency exit to get inside, reach the elevator, and start moving patients down one floor at a time. That's not happening, Reed said flatly. Captain, those patients can't evacuate themselves. And if SWAT breaches while they're still in their rooms, the hostiles will use them as human shields or execute them to make a point. Either way, they're dead. Hayes spoke up. She's got a point. The longer the patients stay upstairs, the worse our tactical options get. Reed looked between them, jaw working. Even if I agreed to this, which I'm not, you'd be going in alone, unarmed, with no backup. One wrong move and you're compromised. I don't need backup. I need a distraction. And 5 minutes. 5 minutes to do what? You can't evacuate 28 patients in 5 minutes. No, but I can move them to secured rooms on the ground level where SWAT can extract them during the breach. Lock them in. Keep them out of the crossfire. Mills looked skeptical. You're proposing we send a civilian nurse into an active hostage situation to move dementia patients during a tactical operation. I'm proposing you use an asset who knows the building, knows the patients, and can move through that facility without triggering alarms because I've done it 100 times. Claire held Mills's gaze. You want to sit here and negotiate until they start killing people to prove they're serious? Be my guest. But I'm not watching my sister die because protocol says I should wait. The silence that followed felt like a held breath. Then Reed swore under his breath. If I sign off on this, and that's a big if, you follow my rules. Comms at all times. The second I say abort, you extract. No arguments. Agreed. And you're not going in alone. Hayes goes with you. Hayes straightened. Sir, if she's compromised, I'm compromised. That puts 2 assets at risk. It also doubles our chances of getting her out alive. Reed turned to Mills. How long before SWAT's ready to breach? 30 minutes. Maybe less if we move fast. Make it 20. We go in coordinated. Distraction at the front. Claire and Hayes extract patients from the back. SWAT breaches on my signal. Mills didn't look happy, but she nodded. I'll coordinate with the tactical team. Reed turned back to Claire. You get your 5 minutes, but if this goes sideways, it's on both of us. Understood. 15 minutes later, Claire was crouched in the shadows behind Riverside Haven's kitchen emergency exit, wearing a borrowed tactical vest that was too big in the shoulders and a comms unit threaded through her ear. Hayes knelt beside her, checking his sidearm with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this too many times to count. The rain had picked up, turning the garden into a muddy mess. Claire's scrubs were soaked through, her hair plastered to her skull, but the discomfort barely registered. All her focus was on the door 10 feet away and the building beyond it. Reed's voice crackled through the comms. Alpha team in position. Bravo team ready at the north perimeter. Donovan, Hayes, you're clear to proceed. Distraction goes live in 30 seconds. Claire's pulse hammered. She'd done extractions before. Pulled wounded soldiers from buildings under fire. Evacuated civilians from combat zones. But this was different. This was her sister. Her responsibility. 20 seconds. Reed counted down. Hayes caught her eye. You good? No. Yeah, me neither. 10 seconds. Distraction is live in 5, 4, 3. The explosion at the front of the building wasn't huge, just a flashbang designed to draw attention and make noise. But it worked. Through the kitchen window, Claire saw lights shifting, heard shouting in German. Go, Reed said. Hayes moved first, testing the emergency exit. It opened silently. Someone had disabled the alarm. He slipped inside, weapon raised, and Claire followed. The kitchen was empty. Industrial appliances gleamed under fluorescent lights. The smell of tonight's dinner, pot roast, she thought, still lingered in the air. Hayes cleared the corners while Claire moved to the service elevator. She pressed the button and the machinery groaned to life, cables creaking. That thing's going to announce us to the whole building, Hayes muttered. Can't be helped, come on. They stepped into the elevator. Claire hit the button for the 3rd floor and the doors slid shut with agonizing slowness. The ascent felt like it took hours instead of seconds. Every creak of the cables made her wince. The doors opened onto the 3rd floor hallway. Empty. Quiet. Too quiet. Claire stepped out, Hayes covering her six. The hallway stretched in both directions, patient rooms on either side, nurses' station at the far end. Room 312 was fourth door on the right. They moved fast and low. Claire reached 312, tested the handle, locked from the outside. Her stomach dropped. The doors were never locked from the outside. It was against protocol. Patients needed to be able to exit in emergencies. Someone had deliberately trapped them inside. "Sarah," Claire whispered through the door. "It's Claire, I'm getting you out." No response. Claire pulled a key card from her pocket, her old staff access that she'd kept after resigning as family liaison. She swiped it and the lock clicked. She pushed the door open. The room was dark except for the glow of a nightlight near the bed. Sarah sat in her chair by the window, staring out at the rain. She didn't turn when Claire entered. "Sarah?" Claire crossed the room, knelt beside her sister. "We need to leave, right now." Sarah turned slowly. Her eyes were vacant, unfocused. "I'm waiting for someone." "I know, but we have to go." "My sister's coming," she promised. Claire's throat tightened. "I'm here, it's me." Sarah looked at her like she was a stranger. "You're not Claire. Claire's younger. She has long hair." "I cut my hair. It's still me." "No." Sarah's voice rose, agitated. "You're lying. Where's Claire? I want Claire." Hayes appeared in the doorway. "We've got movement. Second floor. 2 hostiles heading for the stairwell." Claire took Sarah's hands, forcing her sister to meet her eyes. "Sarah, please. I need you to trust me. We have to leave this room right now or we're both going to die." Something in her tone must have cut through the fog because Sarah went still. Then she nodded, just once. Claire helped her to her feet. Sarah was unsteady, frail, but she moved. They made it into the hallway just as gunfire erupted somewhere below them. The distraction was over. The hostiles knew someone was inside. "Move," Hayes urged. They ran, or tried to. Sarah couldn't move faster than a shuffle, and Claire had to half-carry her toward the service elevator. Behind them, boots pounded on stairs. Hayes turned, fired twice. Someone screamed. They reached the elevator. Claire jammed the button. The doors opened. A hostile stood inside, rifle raised. Claire reacted on instinct. She shoved Sarah aside and drove her shoulder into the gunman's chest, using his own weapon as leverage to slam him into the elevator wall. He grunted, tried to swing the rifle around, but Claire was already inside his guard. She drove her knee into his groin, grabbed his head, and slammed it into the metal handrail. He dropped. Hayes stared at her. "Remind me never to piss you off." Claire grabbed the rifle, checked the magazine. "Get Sarah in the elevator. You know how to use that?" 2 tours, remember? She ejected the magazine, checked the chamber, reloaded with practiced ease. "Move." Hayes got Sarah into the elevator while Claire covered the hallway. More footsteps. More shouting. They were out of time. She backed into the elevator and hit the ground floor button. The doors closed just as 2 more hostiles appeared at the end of the hall. Bullets sparked off the closing doors. The elevator descended with painful slowness. Sarah was crying now, soft, confused sobs that broke Claire's heart. "It's okay," Claire said, keeping her voice calm. "You're safe. I've got you." The elevator lurched to a stop, ground floor. The doors opened, and standing in the kitchen, surrounded by 6 armed hostiles, was a man Claire had never seen before. Tall, mid-40s, expensive suit under tactical gear. He looked like a banker playing soldier. He smiled. "Ms. Donovan, so glad you could join us." Hayes raised his weapon, but 3 rifles swung toward him instantly. "Don't." Claire stepped in front of Sarah, rifle pointed at the man in the suit. "Let them go. You want me fine, but they're not part of this." "Oh, but they are." The man gestured lazily. "Your sister, your colleague. Everyone in this building became part of this the moment you decided to play hero at Silvercrest Medical Center." "Who are you?" "Someone who's been cleaning up your mess for 4 months. You should have died in that ER. Staff Sergeant Hayes should have died. Instead, you both survived and exposed a project worth $800 million. He stepped closer, ignoring the rifle aimed at his chest. "Do you have any idea how many people want you dead, Ms. Donovan?" "Clearly not enough since I'm still standing." He laughed. "Fair point. But let's correct that, shall we?" He nodded to one of his men. The hostile raised his rifle toward Sarah. Claire's world narrowed to a single point. The gunman, the target, the trigger. She fired. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. The hostile went down, and then everything exploded into chaos. Hayes dropped two more shooters before someone hit him with a stun round. He collapsed, convulsing. Claire spun, tried to acquire another target, but something slammed into her back, taser prongs biting through the tactical vest. Electricity coursed through her body. Her muscles locked. The rifle fell from her hands. She hit the floor hard, vision graying. Through the haze, she saw the man in the suit kneeling beside her. "You're right about one thing," he said softly. "You are good at your job. Unfortunately for you, so am I." He stood, addressing someone Claire couldn't see. "Take the sister to the dining room with the others. Make sure the cameras are recording. I want everyone to see what happens when you cross Meridian Solutions." Hands grabbed Sarah. Claire tried to move, tried to fight, but her body wouldn't respond. The man leaned down again. "In 5 minutes, the world's going to watch you execute your own sister. We've got the evidence already planted, surveillance footage showing you entering this building armed, testimony from witnesses who'll swear you went rogue. By tomorrow, you'll be the villain in this story, and Meridian Solutions will be the company that tried to stop you." He walked away. Claire lay on the floor, muscles spasming, unable to do anything but watch as they dragged Sarah toward the dining room. She could hear Reed's voice in her comms, frantic. "Donovan, report. Hayes, do you copy?" She couldn't answer. Her jaw was locked, tongue thick in her mouth. The taser's effect started to fade. Slowly, agonizingly, feeling returned to her limbs. Claire rolled onto her side, gasping. Hayes was unconscious 3 feet away. The rifle was gone. The hostiles had left her with nothing. No weapons, no backup, no way to stop what was about to happen. Claire forced herself to her knees, then her feet. Her legs shook but held. She could hear voices from the dining room, the man in the suit giving orders, someone crying, the distinctive sound of a weapon being loaded. She looked around the kitchen desperately. Knives, fire extinguisher, industrial cleaning supplies under the sink. Her mind raced, cataloging options, running scenarios. She had maybe 3 minutes before they executed the first hostage. 3 minutes to do something, anything, that would stop this. Then she saw it. The gas line running to the industrial stove, the emergency shut-off valve behind the refrigerator. And suddenly, Claire had a plan. It was insane, probably suicidal, would almost certainly get her killed, but it was the only chance she had. She grabbed a knife from the magnetic strip on the wall, cut the flex line on the stove's gas connection. The hiss of escaping gas filled the kitchen immediately. Then she pulled the fire alarm. The building's sprinkler system activated instantly, water cascading from the ceiling. The fire alarm shrieked, and in the dining room, someone shouted in confusion. Claire moved toward the door, knife in hand, knowing she had seconds before the hostiles figured out what was happening. She reached the doorway just as the man in the suit appeared, gun raised. Their eyes met. "You should have stayed down," he said. Claire smiled, cold, dangerous, every bit the combat medic who'd survived 2 tours in hell. "You should have killed me when you had the chance." She threw the knife. It wasn't a perfect throw. Her hands were still shaking from the taser. But it didn't need to be perfect. It just needed to hit. The blade buried itself in his shoulder. He screamed, staggered back, and Claire ran straight at him. She drove her shoulder into his chest, using his own momentum against him. They crashed through the doorway into the dining room. Hostages scattered. Hostiles raised weapons. Claire grabbed the man's sidearm from his holster, rolled, came up firing. 2 shots. 2 bodies. Then something hit her from behind. A baton or rifle stock, she couldn't tell. Pain exploded across her shoulders. She went down hard. Hands grabbed her, forced her to her knees. Someone put a gun to her head. "Stop!" The man in the suit staggered upright, blood streaming from his shoulder. "Don't kill her yet. I want her to watch." He grabbed Sarah from where she sat, frozen in terror, dragged her to the center of the room. "Cameras recording?" he asked. One of his men nodded. "Good." He pulled his backup weapon, pressed it to Sarah's temple. "Ms. Donovan, you've been a problem for Meridian Solutions. But problems can be solved. Witnesses can be eliminated. And you're about to learn that heroes don't exist. Only casualties." His finger tightened on the trigger. Claire screamed, and then the windows exploded inward as SWAT breached from 3 sides simultaneously. Flashbangs detonated like miniature suns. The dining room turned into a strobing nightmare of light and sound and breaking glass. Claire's ears rang so hard she couldn't hear her own breathing. SWAT operators poured through the shattered windows in black armor and helmets, rifles raised, voices shouting commands that sounded like they were coming from underwater. The man in the suit, his weapon still pressed to Sarah's head, spun toward the breach, eyes wide with something that might have been panic or calculation. Claire couldn't tell which and didn't care. She drove her elbow backward into the groin of the hostile holding her. He grunted, grip loosening just enough. Claire twisted, grabbed his wrist, and used his own momentum to slam him face first into the floor. She came up with his sidearm in her hand and put 2 rounds into the kneecap of the nearest hostile before anyone could react. The man in the suit dragged Sarah toward the kitchen, using her as a shield. SWAT operators tracked him, but held fire. Too many civilians in the line. Claire ran. She covered the distance in 3 strides, grabbed a chair, and hurled it at the man's legs. He stumbled. Sarah broke free, fell to her knees, and Claire was on him before he could recover. She drove the pistol into his injured shoulder, right where her knife had buried itself minutes ago. He screamed, weapon dropping. Claire kicked it away, then slammed the butt of her gun against his temple. He went down hard. SWAT operators swarmed the room, securing hostiles with zip ties and barked commands. The chaos settled into organized efficiency within seconds. Medics rushed in, triaging the injured. Someone wrapped a thermal blanket around Sarah, who sat on the floor staring at nothing. Claire knelt beside her sister, hands shaking now that the adrenaline was crashing. "Sarah, look at me." Sarah's eyes focused slowly. "Claire?" "Yeah, it's me. I was scared. I know, it's over now. You came. You promised you'd come." Claire's throat closed up. She pulled Sarah into a hug, feeling her sister's frail body trembling against her chest. For a moment, the gunfire and blood and tactical operators faded. There was just this. 2 sisters, one terrified and confused, the other trying desperately not to fall apart. Reed appeared at Claire's shoulder, looking like he'd aged 5 years in the last 20 minutes. "Donovan, you good?" "Define good." "Alive." "Ambulatory, not actively bleeding out." "Then sure, I'm great." Reed glanced at the man in the suit now being cuffed by 2 SWAT operators. "That's Marcus Vance, Chief of Security for Meridian Solutions. He's been screaming about lawyers since we breached." "Meridian Solutions," Claire repeated, the name clicking pieces into place. "That's the weapons contractor?" "One of them. They built the facility Hayes' team raided, developed the nerve agent, and apparently decided cleaning up loose ends was worth kidnapping 43 people and turning a care facility into a war zone." Claire looked at Vance, who was being hauled to his feet. Blood soaked his shoulder. His face was pale, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. Even now, he wasn't panicking. That bothered her more than the guns had. "He said he wanted this recorded," Claire said slowly, "that he was setting me up to look like the aggressor." Reed nodded. "We found the cameras. 3 different angles, all streaming to an off-site server. They were building a narrative. Rogue nurse with PTSD goes on a rampage, security team tries to stop her. By the time the truth came out, the damage would be done. Except SWAT breached before he could finish the script." "Exactly. But the footage still exists, and Meridian's lawyers are already spinning it. We've got maybe 12 hours before they flood the media with a version of events that makes you the villain." Claire's hands curled into fists. "So what's the play?" "We get ahead of it. FBI's already seizing Meridian's servers. We've got Vance in custody, 6 of his men dead or detained, and enough evidence to bury the company. But we need your testimony. On record. Tonight." "I'm not leaving my sister. She's being transported to Seattle Presbyterian. Full security detail. Best neurological care in the city." Reed's tone softened. "She'll be safe, Claire. But we need you to help us nail these bastards before they lawyer their way out of this." Claire looked at Sarah, who was being checked over by a paramedic. Her sister's eyes were distant again, the brief moment of clarity fading back into confusion. "Okay," Claire said quietly. "Let's finish this." 2 hours later, Claire sat in an FBI interrogation room that smelled like burned coffee and industrial cleaner. She'd been photographed, processed, had her clothes bagged as evidence, and was now wearing borrowed sweats that were 3 sizes too big. Her hands were wrapped in gauze where she'd cut them on broken glass. Her shoulder throbbed where someone had hit her with a baton. But she was alive. Sarah was alive. That was enough. Special Agent Victoria Mills sat across from her, a digital recorder between them. Reed stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching. "Let's start from the beginning," Mills said. "4 months ago, you treated a patient at Silvercrest Medical Center. Walk me through that night." Claire did. She explained the gunshot victim, the symptoms that didn't match, the decision to administer nerve agent antidotes without authorization. Mills took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "And you recognize the symptoms because of your military service?" Mills asked. "Yes." "Which isn't reflected in any official records." "No." Mills set down her pen. "Miss Donovan, we need you to go on record about your time in the Army. I know you've spent 3 years trying to bury that. But if we're going to prosecute Meridian Solutions, we need to establish your expertise. Otherwise, their lawyers will tear apart your credibility." Claire had known this was coming, had known the moment she fired that rifle in the elevator that her quiet life was over. But hearing it stated so bluntly still hit like a gut punch. "What do you need to know?" she asked. "Everything. Service dates, deployments. Why you disappeared from military records." Claire took a breath. "I enlisted in 2019, became a combat medic with the 75th Ranger Regiment. 2 deployments to Afghanistan, 1 to Syria. Saw action in Kandahar, Helmand Province, Al-Hasaka. I was good at my job. Really good. Bronze Star for pulling 3 wounded soldiers out of a firefight while under direct enemy contact." "So why leave?" "Because good wasn't enough." Claire's voice went flat. "My last deployment, we got hit by an IED outside Kandahar. 4 casualties. I triaged them in the field. 2 were savable, 2 weren't. Standard combat medicine. You treat the ones who have a chance, and you accept the ones who don't." She stopped, the memory as sharp as broken glass. "Except one of the ones I triaged as unsavable was the unit commander's brother. I made the call based on his injuries. Massive internal bleeding, 3rd-degree burns over 60% of his body. Even if we'd medevaced him immediately, his chances were maybe 5%. So I focused on the 2 who could survive." Mills's expression was carefully neutral. "And the commander disagreed with your assessment?" "He didn't just disagree. He accused me of negligence, filed a formal complaint, demanded a court-martial." Claire's jaw tightened. "The investigation cleared me. Medical Review Board confirmed my decision was textbook, but the commander had connections. Political pull. He made it clear that if I stayed in the Army, he'd make my life hell." "So you took a deal. Early discharge. Honorable, but quiet. All my service records were sealed, classified under a black op designation that technically never existed. In exchange, the commander dropped his complaint, and I disappeared." She met Mills's eyes. "I thought that was the end of it. I could start over, be a civilian nurse, help people without the politics and the bullshit. Until you saved Staff Sergeant Hayes. Until I did my job and someone decided that made me a liability." Mills glanced at Reed. Some silent communication passed between them. Then Mills leaned forward. "Here's what we've pieced together. Meridian Solutions developed a next-generation nerve agent called VX7. It's designed to kill slowly, mimic other conditions, and leave minimal trace evidence. They were selling it to foreign governments under the guise of riot control technology. Hayes's team raided their production facility and exposed the operation. Meridian couldn't let that stand. So they tried to kill Hayes and make it look like he died from his gunshot wound," Claire said. "Exactly. But you recognized the poisoning and saved him, which meant Meridian's weapon had failed, and you were proof it could be countered." Mills pulled up a file on her tablet. "They tried to eliminate you quietly. When that didn't work, they decided to destroy your credibility instead. Frame you as a dangerous, unstable veteran who went rogue. And Caldwell's complaint gave them the opening they needed." "Director Caldwell didn't know what he was doing," Reed interjected. "He filed that complaint to cover his own ass after you broke protocol. But it flagged databases that Meridian was monitoring. They saw an opportunity and took it." Claire absorbed that. "So Caldwell's not dirty, just incompetent." "Incompetent and criminally negligent," Mills said. "He accessed classified patient files without authorization and discussed them with staff who didn't have clearance. That's a federal crime. Dr. Cross is facing similar charges." "Good," Claire said flatly. Mills tapped her tablet. "We've also identified the secondary hit team, 2 operatives from a German PMC called Einheit Secure. Both dead, One at Silvercrest, one here. Their contractor records show payments from a shell company owned by Meridian. So you've got them. The evidence is there. We've got the foot soldiers. But Meridian's executive team is lawyered up and claiming they had no knowledge of Vance's actions. They're saying he went rogue, acted independently, and they're cooperating fully with the investigation. Claire's blood went cold. You're telling me they're going to walk? I'm telling you they're going to try. Mills's expression was grim. Corporate structures are designed for this. The people at the top insulate themselves with enough layers that proving they gave the orders is nearly impossible, unless we can flip someone on the inside. Vance. He's not talking, already lawyered up, and his deal with Meridian probably includes a golden parachute if he takes the fall and keeps quiet. Claire wanted to throw something, wanted to scream. She'd risked everything, her life, her sister's life, the lives of 43 hostages. And the people actually responsible might walk away with nothing more than a PR headache. There has to be something, she said. Reed spoke up. There is, but it's going to require you to do something you're not going to like. What? Go public. Tell your story. All of it. The military service, the cover-up, Hayes, Meridian, everything. If we can get ahead of their narrative, turn you into the whistleblower instead of the villain, it changes the game. Claire stared at him. You want me to out myself, destroy the anonymity I've spent 3 years building. I want you to take control of the narrative before they do. Reed's voice was firm. Meridian's counting on you staying quiet, hiding, letting them spin this however they want. But if you step into the light, own the story, make yourself the hero instead of the target, they lose their advantage. And I lose any chance of a normal life. You lost that the moment you saved Hayes. Reed's expression softened. I know this isn't fair. I know you didn't ask for any of this, but you've got a choice. Stay silent and let Meridian bury you, or fight back and make them pay. Claire looked at Mills. If I go public, what happens to my sister? She's vulnerable. If Meridian decides to retaliate, we'll protect her, Mills said. Witness protection if necessary, round-the-clock security, whatever it takes. And if I do this and they still walk, if the lawyers and the money and the political connections are enough to make all the evidence disappear, then at least the world will know what they did, Reed said. And sometimes that's enough. Claire didn't believe that. Didn't believe exposure and public shame meant anything to corporations that measured consequences in stock prices and quarterly earnings. But Reed was right about one thing. Staying silent wasn't an option anymore. What do you need from me? She asked. A press conference. Tomorrow morning. FBI will provide the platform. You tell your story, we release the evidence we've gathered, and we let public pressure do what legal proceedings might not. And if Meridian's lawyers come after me? They will, Mills said bluntly. Defamation suits, harassment, attempts to discredit you. It's going to be ugly. So I'm trading one kind of target for another. You're trading survival for justice, not the same thing. Claire sat back, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. Her hands hurt, her shoulder hurt, every muscle in her body ached from the adrenaline crash. But beneath the pain was something else, something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Anger. Not the hot, reactive anger that got people killed in combat. The cold, focused kind. The kind that planned and executed and didn't stop until the job was done. Okay, she said. I'll do it. But I want something in return. Reed raised an eyebrow. We're already offering protection. Not for me. For the hostages. The staff at Riverside Haven. The patients at Silvercrest who got caught in the crossfire. Claire leaned forward. I want Meridian to pay for their medical care. All of it. Therapy, medication, whatever they need. And I want it in writing before I say one word to the press. Mills and Reed exchanged glances. Then Mills nodded. We can make that happen. As part of any settlement or judgment, we'll include provisions for victim compensation. Not as part of a settlement, as a condition of my cooperation. Non-negotiable. Reed smiled slightly. You're learning how this works. I had good teachers. The press conference was scheduled for 9 a.m. the next morning at FBI headquarters in downtown Seattle. Claire spent the night in a secure hotel room with 2 agents stationed outside her door and Hayes sitting in the chair by the window, refusing to leave despite her protests that he needed medical attention for the taser burns. I've had worse, he said, which probably wasn't reassuring, but Claire was too tired to argue. She tried to sleep, couldn't. Her mind kept replaying the last 18 hours, the hospital burning, the firefight in the care facility, the moment Vance had put that gun to Sarah's head. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her sister's terrified face. At 6 a.m., she gave up and took a shower hot enough to scald. The water turned pink from the blood and dirt she hadn't realized was still caked in her hair. By the time she finished, her skin was raw and her hands were shaking again. Hayes had coffee waiting when she emerged. Figured you could use this. Thanks. They sat in silence for a while. Then Hayes spoke quietly. You know you don't have to do this. The press conference. There are other ways. Not good ones. Maybe. But going public makes you a permanent target. Every nut job with an agenda, every conspiracy theorist, every internet troll, they're all going to come after you. And that doesn't stop when Meridian goes down. Claire sipped the coffee. It was terrible, burned and bitter, but she drank it anyway. You think I should stay quiet? I think you should do whatever keeps you alive. Everything else is secondary. Even justice? Justice doesn't mean much if you're dead. Claire smiled without humor. That's pretty cynical for someone who raided a weapons facility to stop bad guys from selling chemical weapons. That's different. That was a mission. This is your life. Yeah, it is. Which means I get to decide what I do with it. Claire met his eyes. I spent 3 years hiding because I thought that would keep me safe. It didn't. They found me anyway. So if I'm going to be a target either way, I might as well make it count for something. Hayes studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Okay. Just don't expect me to let you do it alone. You planning to be my bodyguard now? I'm planning to be someone who's got your back. There's a difference. Before Claire could respond, Reed knocked and entered without waiting for an answer. We're on in 2 hours. FBI's prepped a statement, but you can modify it however you want. We've also got legal standing by in case Meridian tries to file an injunction. Will they? Claire asked. Probably. But we're moving fast enough that it won't matter. Once you're on camera, the story's out. They can't stuff it back in the bottle. Reed handed her a folder. Inside was the prepared statement, 3 pages of carefully worded testimony that laid out the facts without editorializing. It was professional, bloodless, exactly the kind of thing a lawyer would write. Claire read it twice, then set it aside. I'm not using this. Reed blinked. Excuse me? This makes it sound like a legal proceeding. I'm not reading a deposition. I'm telling my story. She pulled out a pen and a blank sheet of paper. Give me an hour. Reed looked like he wanted to argue, but thought better of it. 1 hour. Then we need to move. Claire wrote for 53 minutes. She didn't use the prepared statement at all. Instead, she wrote the truth, raw, unfiltered, the kind of story that wouldn't survive a legal review, but would connect with anyone who'd ever been underestimated, discarded, or told they didn't matter. By the time they arrived at FBI headquarters, a crowd had already gathered. News vans lined the street. Reporters jostled for position behind police barricades. Cameras flashed like strobe lights. Inside, Mills briefed her one last time. We'll start with a statement from the FBI director establishing the investigation. Then you'll give your testimony. After that, we'll take questions from the press, but you don't have to answer anything you're not comfortable with. How long do I have? As long as you need, but shorter is better. You want to hit hard and fast before Meridian's PR team can respond. Claire nodded. Her hands were steady now. The fear had burned away, leaving only focus. They led her to a conference room packed with journalists and cameras. The FBI director spoke first, standard bureaucratic language about ongoing investigations and commitment to justice. Claire barely heard it. Then Mills introduced her. Ms. Claire Donovan, former Army combat medic and registered nurse. Claire stepped to the podium, looked out at the sea of faces and cameras, took a breath, and told the truth. 4 months ago, I saved a man's life. I did it because that's what I was trained to do, what I've spent my entire adult life doing. But that decision, to trust my instincts, to act when protocol said wait, made me a target. Not because I did anything wrong, because I did something right, and it exposed people who profit from suffering. She told them about Hayes, about the nerve agent, about recognizing symptoms that others missed because she'd seen them before in war zones most Americans only read about. She told them about the suspension, about Caldwell and Cross using bureaucracy to punish competence, about how that complaint had opened a door for Meridian Solutions to find her. She told them about Silvercrest under siege, about Riverside Haven turned into a war zone, about watching armed men put a gun to her sister's head while cameras recorded everything for a narrative that would paint Claire as the monster. "I'm not a hero," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I'm a nurse who got caught between people doing their jobs and people protecting their profits. And I'm here today because I'm done being silent about it." She laid out the evidence: Meridian's illegal weapons development, the contract killings, the conspiracy to frame her. She named names, cited facts, made it impossible to dismiss as speculation or conspiracy theory. Meridian Solutions is counting on complexity to protect them, counting on lawyers and shell companies and plausible deniability. They're counting on people being too tired or too cynical to care about 43 hostages in a care facility or a hospital full of patients caught in crossfire. Claire leaned into the microphone. "But I'm betting they're wrong. I'm betting people still care when corporations think they can murder with impunity. And I'm betting the truth still matters." She finished, stepped back. The room erupted with questions, but Mills was already moving forward, shutting down the press conference before it could turn into chaos. They escorted Claire out through a side exit. Hayes and Reed flanked her, creating a buffer against the reporters who tried to surge forward. In the SUV heading back to the safe house, Claire's phone, newly issued by FBI, secure line only, buzzed. She glanced at the screen, a text from an unknown number. "You just declared war. Hope you're ready for what comes next. MV Marcus Vance." Texting from custody. Which meant he still had access, still had resources, still had enough confidence to threaten her openly. Claire showed the text to Reed. His face went dark. "How the hell is he sending messages from lockup?" "Because someone's protecting him," Claire said quietly. "Someone with enough pull to make sure he stays connected, even behind bars." Reed grabbed his own phone, started making calls, but Claire was already thinking 3 steps ahead. Vance wouldn't risk communicating unless he thought he had leverage. Which meant Meridian's executive team wasn't just spinning the story. They were actively working to discredit her, undermine the investigation, and ensure their people stayed loyal. The press conference had been the opening move, but the real fight was just beginning. And this time, Claire wasn't playing defense. The text from Vance burned in Claire's mind like a brand. She stared at the screen while Reed barked orders into his phone, demanding to know how a federal detainee had access to outside communications. Hayes leaned forward from the seat behind her, reading over her shoulder. "He's baiting you," Hayes said quietly. "I know. So don't take it." Claire turned to look at him. "He sent this because he thinks he's untouchable. That even from a cell, he's got enough protection to win, which means there's someone we haven't identified yet. Someone pulling strings." Reed finished his call, face dark with anger. "Vance's lawyer visited him 2 hours ago. They're claiming attorney-client privilege, but I'd bet my pension that lawyer smuggled in a burner phone." "Can you prove it?" Claire asked. "Not without a warrant. And getting a warrant to search a defense attorney takes time we don't have. By the time we navigate the legal maze, whoever's protecting Vance will have covered their tracks." Reed slammed his fist against the armrest. "These people know how to work the system. They've got contingencies for their contingencies." The SUV pulled into the secure garage beneath the safe house, a nondescript building in an industrial district that probably looked abandoned to anyone driving past. 2 agents escorted them upstairs to a 3rd-floor apartment that smelled like fresh paint and had exactly 0 personality. Government furniture, blank walls. The kind of place designed for people to disappear into. Claire hated it on sight. Mills was waiting inside, laptop open on the dining table, screens showing news coverage of the press conference. Every major network had picked it up. Social media was exploding. The story was everywhere. "You're trending," Mills said without preamble. #1 on 3 platforms. Meridian's stock dropped 18% in the last 2 hours. And their CEO just announced an emergency board meeting. "Good," Claire said. "It gets better. We've had 6 calls from current and former Meridian employees offering to cooperate with the investigation. People are jumping ship." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "That was fast." "Public pressure works when you apply it correctly." Mills pulled up another screen showing email chains, financial records, internal memos. "One of those employees is Meridian's head of R&D. She brought documentation proving the executive team knew about VX7's illegal applications and approved sales to sanctioned governments. This isn't just Vance going rogue. This goes all the way to the top. Claire felt something loosen in her chest. You've got them. We've got a case, but cases take time. Trials, appeals, legal maneuvering. It could be years before anyone sees a prison cell. And in the meantime, Meridian's lawyers will do everything they can to discredit you, intimidate witnesses, and delay proceedings until people stop paying attention. So what's the move? Reed spoke up. We keep the pressure on. Your testimony opened the door. Now we flood the zone with evidence until there's nowhere left to hide. Financial crimes, weapons trafficking, conspiracy to commit murder. We throw everything at them and see what sticks. Claire's phone buzzed again. Another text. Your sister looks peaceful when she sleeps. Would be a shame if something disturbed her. MV. Ice flooded Claire's veins. She showed the message to Reed. His expression went from angry to murderous in half a second. He's threatening Sarah. He's threatening everyone I care about. Claire's voice was steady, but her hands weren't. This isn't just about winning anymore. It's about making sure I know they can still hurt me. We've got agents at the hospital. It doesn't matter. If they want to get to her, they will. You can't protect her 24/7 forever. Eventually, budgets run out, attention shifts, and I'm left standing alone while Meridian waits for the perfect moment to strike. Mills closed her laptop. So what do you want to do? Claire looked at the screens showing her face on every news channel, looked at the documentation proving Meridian's guilt, looked at Hayes and Reed and Mills, people who'd risked their careers to help her, and she made a decision. I want to meet with Vance. Reed stared at her. Absolutely not. He's communicating with me directly, which means he wants something. Let's find out what. It's a trap. He'll use anything you say against you, twist your words, record the conversation, and leak it to make you look unstable or vengeful. Probably. But he's also arrogant enough to think he can outsmart me, and arrogant people make mistakes. Claire met Reed's eyes. Set up the meeting. Controlled environment, you monitor everything. But let me talk to him. Why? Because right now we're playing their game. Legal proceedings, media spin, lawyers arguing technicalities. That's the battlefield Meridian owns, but Vance is a soldier pretending to be a businessman. I know how soldiers think. Let me get inside his head. Hayes spoke up. She's right. Vance is tactical, not legal. He's used to direct action, not courtroom strategy. If anyone can get him to slip up, it's someone who speaks his language. Mills looked skeptical. And if he doesn't slip up, if he just uses the meeting to threaten her more directly, then we'll know for sure he's got nothing, Claire said. But I don't think that's what this is. He texted me twice. That's not intimidation, that's negotiation. He wants to make a deal. Reed was silent for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone. I'll make the call. But if this goes sideways, it's on all of us. 6 hours later, Claire sat in an FBI interrogation room across from Marcus Vance. He looked worse than he had at Riverside Haven, shoulder bandaged, face pale from blood loss and whatever painkillers they'd given him. But his eyes were sharp, calculating. He studied her like she was a puzzle he hadn't quite figured out. Reed and Mills watched through one-way glass. Hayes stood in the corner of the room, technically present as Claire's security consultant. The recording equipment was obvious. 3 cameras, audio backup, everything documented. Vance smiled. Ms. Donovan, you look better than the last time we met. You look like you got stabbed. How's the shoulder? Painful. Your aim was off. I was going for center mass. You moved. Lucky me. He shifted in his chair, wincing. So, you wanted to talk? Here I am. Claire leaned back, keeping her posture relaxed despite the adrenaline screaming through her system. You texted me, twice. That suggests you've got something to say that couldn't wait for lawyers to negotiate. I wanted to see if you'd come. Most people in your position would hide behind federal protection and wait for the system to grind forward. But you're not most people, are you? Is that a compliment or a threat? An observation. You're a combat medic playing civilian. But the moment things got dangerous, you didn't freeze. You adapted, improvised, used the environment as a weapon. That's not nurse training. That's battlefield experience. Your point? Vance leaned forward as much as his restraints allowed. My point is that you and I aren't that different. We both follow orders, both do what's necessary to accomplish the mission. The only difference is who signs our paychecks. Claire smiled without warmth. You think we're the same? You took hostages, threatened to execute my sister on camera, tried to frame me for terrorism. I followed my orders. Just like you followed yours when you treated Hayes. Just like you followed them when you decided which soldiers lived and which ones died in that IED strike outside Kandahar. The reference to her last deployment hit like a physical blow. Claire kept her face neutral, but Vance saw something because his smile widened. You think your records are sealed? That classification actually means anything when the right people want information? He laughed, short, bitter. Ms. Donovan, I know everything about you. The Bronze Star you earned, the commander whose brother you let die, the deal you cut to disappear from military databases. I know you wake up at 3 a.m. most nights. That you visit your sister twice a week and lie about why you left the army. That you've spent 3 years pretending to be someone you're not. Claire's hands curled into fists under the table. You finished? Not quite. See, Meridian Solutions hired me because I'm good at finding people who don't want to be found. And I found you. Not because you made mistakes, because the system you trusted to protect you was designed to fail. He paused. The same system you're trusting now to deliver justice. What do you want, Vance? I want you to understand that going after Meridian won't end the way you think. You exposed VX7. Great. But there are 6 other projects just like it in development. You testified against the executive team. Fantastic. But they'll get replaced by people who are better at covering their tracks. You think you're fighting corruption, but you're just identifying the weakest link so the chain can be reinforced. Claire studied him. That's a long way of saying you've got nothing. I'm saying I've got a way out for both of us. I'm listening. Vance glanced at the cameras, then back at Claire. Meridian's board wants this to go away. Bad publicity, federal investigations, tanking stock prices, it's all cutting into profits. They're willing to make a deal. Full victim compensation. Settlement for you and everyone affected by our operations. In exchange, you drop the criminal complaints and sign an NDA. You're offering me money to shut up. I'm offering you a realistic solution. You get paid. Your sister gets the best medical care money can buy. The hostages get compensated. And you can go back to being a civilian nurse without worrying about Meridian coming after you. Claire laughed, genuine surprise mixed with disgust. You actually think I'd take that deal? I think you're smart enough to recognize when you're outmatched. Meridian has resources you can't even imagine. Lawyers, lobbyists, political connections that go all the way to Washington. You're one person with a compelling story. But stories fade. Public attention shifts, and when it does, we'll still be here. Still operating, still profitable. And if I say no, Vance's expression hardened. Then you spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. Every strange car on your street, every unfamiliar face in a crowd, every time your sister's facility has a security lapse. You'll never know if it's random chance or Meridian reminding you that deals expire, but grudges don't. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Claire let it sit for a moment. Then she smiled. You know what I think, Vance? I think you're terrified. I think Meridian's board sent you here to make this offer because they know they're losing. The stock price, the whistleblowers, the evidence piling up. They're watching their empire crack, and they're desperate to stop the bleeding. You're overestimating your impact. Am I? Because 6 employees came forward after my press conference. How many more are waiting to see which way the wind blows? How many are sitting on evidence right now, wondering if they should be the next one to cut a deal with prosecutors? Vance's jaw tightened. You think you've won. You haven't. All you've done is paint a target on your back. Claire leaned forward, voice dropping to something cold and precise. The target was already there. You put it there 4 months ago when you decided I was a loose end. But here's what you didn't count on. I'm not scared of you anymore. I've survived firefights in Kandahar. I've saved lives under artillery fire. I've spent 3 years hiding from who I am because I thought that would keep me safe. It didn't, so now I'm done hiding. She stood up. You can tell Meridian's board that I'm not interested in their deal. I'm interested in watching them face consequences, real ones, the kind that end careers and drain bank accounts, and put people in prison for the rest of their lives. And if they want to keep threatening me, fine. Because every threat they make is more evidence. Every move they take against me is another nail in their coffin. Vance's composure cracked, just for a second. But Claire saw it. The flicker of uncertainty, the realization that his play hadn't worked. "You're making a mistake," he said. "Probably, but it's my mistake to make." Claire walked out of the interrogation room. Hayes followed. Reed and Mills were waiting in the observation room, both looking stunned. "That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen," Mills said. "Probably both." Claire felt the adrenaline crash coming, but pushed it back. "Did you get what you needed?" Reed nodded slowly. He confirmed that Meridian's board authorized the settlement offer, which means they're involved in the cover-up. That's conspiracy. We can use this. Good. Because I meant every word. I'm not taking their deal. I know. Which is why we're going to make sure you survive the fallout. The next 72 hours moved like a fever dream. Federal prosecutors filed charges against 6 Meridian executives, including the CEO and CFO. The whistleblower's testimony corroborated Claire's account down to specific dates and transaction records. Financial forensics teams traced payments from Meridian to offshore accounts linked to Vance and the operatives who'd attacked Silvercrest and Riverside Haven. The paper trail was damning: purchase orders for weapons-grade chemicals, emails discussing asset elimination, encrypted communications about Claire being a necessary termination. Meridian's stock went into freefall, dropping 43% in 3 days. Trading was halted twice. Their CEO resigned in a carefully worded statement that admitted nothing while apologizing for everything. 2 board members were arrested at SeaTac Airport trying to board a private flight to Dubai. A third turned herself in with her lawyer, already negotiating immunity in exchange for testimony against the others. The media coverage was relentless. Every network ran segments. Print journalists wrote long-form pieces about corporate accountability and whistleblower protection. Social media turned Claire into both a hero and a target. Supporters praised her courage, while conspiracy theorists claimed she was a deep state operative or a crisis actor. Claire ignored all of it. She spent her days giving depositions, answering questions from prosecutors, and reviewing evidence that would be presented at trial. She spent her evenings at Seattle Presbyterian Hospital, sitting beside Sarah's bed, holding her sister's hand while Sarah talked about people and places that didn't exist anymore. The doctors said the trauma of the hostage situation had accelerated Sarah's decline. The confusion was worse. The moments of clarity fewer and farther between. They adjusted medications, brought in specialists, but the prognosis hadn't changed. Early onset Alzheimer's was progressive, irreversible. All they could do was manage symptoms and try to maintain quality of life for as long as possible. Claire made peace with that. Some battles couldn't be won with strategy or determination or refusal to give up. Some losses were inevitable. The only choice was how you carried them. On the 4th day after the interrogation, Reed called Claire back to FBI headquarters. Not for more testimony, for something else. She walked into a conference room and found Director Ethan Caldwell and Dr. Julian Cross sitting at a table with their lawyers, looking like they'd aged a decade in a week. Both men had been charged with federal crimes: unauthorized disclosure of classified information, criminal negligence, obstruction of justice. Their careers were destroyed, their reputations in ruins, and they were here because their lawyers thought an apology might help with sentencing. "Ms. Donovan," Caldwell began, his voice hollow and rehearsed, I need to say that I was wrong about everything. The suspension, the complaint, the way I handled your case. I was trying to protect the hospital's reputation, and I ended up putting lives at risk, including yours. I'm deeply sorry." Cross cleared his throat, couldn't quite meet her eyes. "I let my ego dictate my decisions. I saw you as a threat to my authority instead of a colleague who was doing exceptional work under difficult circumstances. When you were right about that patient, instead of acknowledging it, I doubled down on my initial assessment. That was unprofessional and dangerous. I apologize." Claire looked at them both, saw the fear underneath the carefully constructed contrition. They weren't here because they'd experienced some moral awakening. They were here because their lawyers had calculated that public apology plus cooperation might shave years off their sentences. "I appreciate you saying that," Claire said carefully, keeping her voice neutral. "But words don't undo the damage. I lost my job. My reputation. I had armed mercenaries hunting me through a hospital because your complaint flagged databases that exposed my identity to people who wanted me dead. I know, Caldwell said quickly, and I'll have to live with that knowledge for the rest of my life. But for what it's worth, I've been speaking with the hospital board. They've expressed interest in offering you your position back, with a significant promotion and salary increase. Head of Emergency Services. You'd have autonomy to implement protocols based on your expertise. Claire almost laughed. You think I want to come back? I think you deserve the opportunity to continue doing the work you're clearly exceptional at. Silvercrest needs people like you. People who prioritize patient outcomes over bureaucratic convenience. Silvercrest had me, and you suspended me for it. Cross's lawyer leaned forward, trying to regain control of the conversation. Ms. Donovan, my client is facing serious federal charges. Any statement you make to prosecutors regarding his character and professional conduct could significantly impact sentencing recommendations. We're hoping you might consider providing testimony that acknowledges his skills as a surgeon, his years of service. I'll tell prosecutors exactly what I saw, Claire interrupted. Doctor, Cross is a highly skilled trauma surgeon with an exceptional technical ability. He's also someone who allowed professional jealousy to compromise his medical judgment and endangered a patient's life by refusing to consider alternative diagnoses. Those are both facts. What the court decides to do with those facts is between Dr. Cross and the legal system. She stood up. We're done here. Caldwell tried one more time. Ms. Donovan, please, I know we failed you, but there are patients at Silvercrest who need someone with your training and experience. Good nurses are rare. Great ones even rarer. Don't let what we did drive you away from a career you're obviously meant for. Claire stopped at the door, looked back at him. You're right that good nurses are rare, which is why hospitals should think carefully before punishing them for being too competent. You didn't fail me, Director Caldwell. You made a choice. You chose protocol over outcomes, politics over patient care, and bureaucratic self-preservation over the safety of people under your watch. That wasn't failure. That was decision-making, and now you're facing the consequences of those decisions. She walked out. Reed followed her into the hallway. You could have gone easier on them, Reed said quietly. Their lawyers are trying to negotiate reduced sentences. A positive character reference from you might have helped. They made their choices. Now they live with the results. Same rules apply to everyone. Fair enough, but I've got something you might actually want to hear. He led her to another office where a different Captain Reed, the military one, not the FBI agent, was waiting with Hayes and two officers Claire didn't recognize. Both wore special operations insignia. Both had the look of people who'd seen combat and carried it quietly. Ms. Donovan, Captain Reed said, standing, thank you for meeting with us. I know you've had a difficult few weeks. That's one way to describe it. I'll get straight to the point. We're rebuilding our chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear response teams for Special Operations Command. After what happened with VX-7, the Pentagon conducted a full capability assessment and realized we have critical gaps in our ability to identify and counter next-generation chemical weapons in the field. We need people who can recognize these agents under combat conditions, implement effective treatment protocols, and train others to do the same. He slid a folder across the desk. Claire opened it and found a contract. Military contract. Special Operations Medical Support Division. This isn't a regular enlistment, Reed continued. You'd be a civilian specialist consultant working directly with special operations teams. No chain of command bullshit. No bureaucratic oversight from people who've never seen combat. You'd have full autonomy to develop protocols, select equipment, and make medical decisions in the field without waiting for authorization from some administrator in an air-conditioned office 3,000 miles away. Claire read through the contract carefully. The salary was competitive, benefits comprehensive, and most importantly, the operational parameters gave her exactly what Caldwell had pretended to offer. Real autonomy. Actual authority to make decisions based on expertise rather than politics. This is about the facility in Eastern Europe, she said slowly. The one Hayes' team raided. That facility and 6 others we've identified through signals intelligence and informant networks. Meridian wasn't the only contractor developing illegal chemical weapons. They were just the ones who got caught. There are other companies, other governments, other programs running right now that pose the same threat VX7 did. Hayes spoke up from where he'd been standing silently by the window. We need to shut them down. Permanently. And we need people who understand what we're up against. Someone who can look at a patient presenting with ambiguous symptoms and recognize immediately that they're being poisoned. Someone who won't hesitate to implement countermeasures even if it means breaking standard protocol. Someone like you. There are other combat medics with chemical weapons training, Claire said. There are, Reed agreed. But none of them identified a novel nerve agent in under 2 minutes based purely on clinical observation. None of them treated it successfully without having the specific compound identified. And none of them then survived multiple assassination attempts, turned a care facility into a defensive position, and publicly exposed a billion-dollar weapons contractor despite knowing it would make them a permanent target. He leaned forward slightly. You're not just qualified, Ms. Donovan. You're exactly who we need. Someone who combines exceptional medical skills with tactical thinking and the kind of moral courage that doesn't bend when powerful people apply pressure. That's rare, maybe unique. Claire set down the contract. If I do this, I'd be going back to the same world I left 3 years ago. The deployments, the combat zones, the constant risk. I walked away from that because I couldn't carry it anymore. Because watching people die and knowing I couldn't save them all was destroying me. I know, Reed said quietly, and I can't promise this will be different. People will still die. You'll still face impossible choices about who to save when you can't save everyone. That's the nature of combat medicine. It doesn't change just because you're working with special operations instead of regular army units. So why would I say yes? Because hiding didn't work. Because pretending to be someone else didn't keep you safe. And because you've spent the last 2 weeks proving that you're not someone who walks away when things get dangerous, you're someone who runs toward the fire because that's where people need help. The words hit harder than Claire expected. She looked at Hayes, who met her eyes steadily. It's your call, Hayes said. Nobody's going to pressure you, but for what it's worth, I'd rather have you watching my back than anyone else on the planet. You saved my life once. I'd like the chance to return the favor. Claire looked back at the contract, at the section detailing deployment schedules, operational parameters, rules of engagement. It was everything she'd walked away from, everything she'd told herself she didn't want anymore. Except that wasn't quite true. She hadn't left because she didn't want to help people. She'd left because the system she was working in punished her for being good at it, because commanders valued politics over outcomes, and bureaucrats made decisions that got people killed. Because she was tired of fighting 2 wars, one against the enemy and one against the people who were supposed to be on her side. This contract was different. This gave her the authority to do her job without someone like Caldwell or Cross standing over her shoulder questioning every decision. Can I think about it? She asked. Take all the time you need, Reed said. We're not going anywhere, but for the record, we're hoping your answer is yes. Claire left the meeting with the contract in her bag and Hayes walking beside her. They didn't speak until they reached the parking garage where his truck was waiting. You're going to say yes, Hayes said. It wasn't a question. How do you know? Because you're not someone who sits on the sidelines. You proved that at Silvercrest, at Riverside Haven, at that press conference when you could have taken Meridian's money and disappeared. Maybe I'm tired of proving things. Maybe, but I don't think that's it. Hayes unlocked his truck, leaned against the door. I think you spent 3 years trying to be someone you're not because you thought that would make the pain stop. And what you learned is that running from yourself just means the pain follows you. So now you're deciding whether to keep running or to stop and actually deal with it. Claire wanted to argue but couldn't find the words, because he was right. She had been running. From the memories, from the guilt, from the person she'd been in those combat zones. And it hadn't helped. The nightmares still came. The weight of those impossible choices still pressed down. All she'd accomplished was isolating herself from the one thing that had ever made sense, using her skills to save lives. I need to see Sarah first, she said finally, before I decide anything. Fair enough. You need a ride? I've got it. Thanks, though. Hayes climbed into his truck but rolled down the window before driving away. For what it's worth, Claire, I think you already made your decision. You just haven't admitted it to yourself yet. He was probably right about that, too. Claire drove to Seattle Presbyterian in her borrowed FBI vehicle, threading through evening traffic while her mind spun through scenarios and possibilities. The contract sat in her bag like a weight, like a choice she wasn't ready to make, but couldn't avoid. Sarah was awake when Claire arrived, sitting in a chair by the window watching rain streak down the glass. The room was nicer than Riverside Haven had been, private, well-appointed, with art on the walls and actual furniture instead of institutional basics. The settlement with Meridian's bankruptcy trustee had funded this, had made sure Sarah would have the best possible care, even as her mind continued its slow dissolution. "Hey," Claire said softly, settling into the chair beside her sister. "How are you feeling?" Sarah turned slowly, eyes focusing with visible effort. "I know you." "Yeah, I'm Claire, your sister." "Claire!" Sarah tested the name, rolling it around like an unfamiliar object. Then something clicked and her expression cleared slightly. "You were gone. You went away and I was scared. I'm sorry. I'm here now. Promise?" "Promise." They sat in silence for a while. Claire held Sarah's hand and watched the rain and tried not to think about the contract or the decision or the future that kept trying to drag her forward when all she wanted was to stay in this moment. "I'm proud of you," Sarah said suddenly. Claire blinked. "What?" "I saw you. On the television. You were talking about bad people doing bad things, and you weren't scared." Sarah's grip tightened slightly. "You were always braver than me, even when we were little. I used to be jealous." "You don't have anything to be jealous about." "Yes, I do. You did something important, and I just—" Sarah's voice trailed off, confusion creeping back in. "I forgot what I was saying." "It's okay." "Is it?" Sarah looked at her with sudden clarity, the kind that came and went like lightning. "I'm forgetting everything, Claire. The doctors won't say it, but I know. Eventually I won't remember you, won't remember myself. I'll just be gone even though I'm still here." Claire's throat closed up. "Sarah! So promise me something. Anything. Don't waste time trying to hold on to things you can't save. Don't sit here watching me disappear when there are people out there you can actually help." Sarah's eyes were wet, but her voice was firm. "I'm proud of what you did. Stopping those people, telling the truth. That's who you are. Don't give that up to keep me company while I forget your name." The words hit like a gut punch. Claire wanted to argue, to say that being here mattered, that she wasn't giving up anything. But Sarah was right. Sitting vigil while her sister's mind dissolved wasn't helping anyone. It was just another way of hiding. "Okay," Claire said quietly. "I promise." Sarah nodded, satisfied. Then the clarity faded and she turned back to the window. "It's raining." "Yeah, it is." "I like the rain." Claire stayed for another hour, talking about nothing, holding her sister's hand while Sarah drifted in and out of awareness. When she finally left, the sky had gone full dark and the rain was coming down in sheets. She sat in her car in the parking garage and pulled out the contract. Read through it one more time. Thought about Hayes and Reed and the facilities in Eastern Europe. Thought about VX-7 and the other weapons still being developed. Thought about all the people who'd die if someone didn't stop it. She thought about Caldwell and Cross sitting in that conference room, trying to bargain their way out of consequences. About Vance in his cell, still convinced he could win. About Meridian's executives facing trial, their empire crumbling because one person had refused to disappear quietly. And she thought about what Sarah had said. Don't waste time trying to hold on to things you can't save. Claire pulled out her phone and called Reed. He answered on the first ring. "Donovan, what's up?" "The contract, I'm in." There was a brief pause. Then Reed said, "You sure?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway. When do I start?" "Training begins in 2 weeks, Joint Base Lewis McChord. We'll run you through refresher courses on chemical weapons identification, advanced trauma protocols, and tactical field medicine. After that, you'll be attached to Hayes' unit for the first deployment." "Where?" "Can't say over an unsecured line, but pack for cold weather." "Understood." "Donovan, you made the right call. Ask me again after the first deployment." She hung up before Reed could respond. Sat in the silence of the parking garage, listening to rain drum against the roof of the car. She'd just committed to going back to the world she'd fled 3 years ago. back to war zones and impossible choices, and the kind of work that left scars you couldn't see. But this time was different. This time she wasn't running from who she was. She was running toward it. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. FBI wrapped up the initial wave of testimony. Federal prosecutors prepared indictments. Meridian filed for bankruptcy protection and immediately faced challenges from the victims' compensation fund Claire had insisted on. Caldwell and Cross both pled guilty to reduced charges in exchange for cooperation with ongoing investigations. Both lost their medical licenses. Both faced prison time. Caldwell, 18 months, Cross 24. The hospital board issued a public apology and established new protocols for handling protocol violations and staff complaints. Rita called Claire 3 times to catch up, and once to tell her that Silvercrest had offered the head of emergency services position to an outside candidate, a former Air Force trauma surgeon with a reputation for not taking shit from administrators. "She reminds me of you," Rita said. "Only louder and with worse language. You'd like her. Maybe I'll meet her someday." "You better. And when you come back from wherever the hell you're going, drinks are on me. You've earned it. I'll hold you to that." Vance's trial date was set for 6 months out. The other Meridian executives faced similar timelines. The legal process would grind on for years, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. Too much evidence, too many witnesses, too much public attention to sweep it under the rug. Claire spent her final days in Seattle visiting Sarah, packing the few possessions she'd accumulated, and preparing mentally for what came next. Hayes checked in regularly, offering advice on what to pack and what to expect from Special Operations medical training. Reed sent briefing documents about the facility they'd be targeting on the first deployment, location redacted, but the intelligence reports made it clear this was going to be more dangerous than a standard raid. On her last night before reporting to Lewis McCord, Claire stood in her temporary apartment, the FBI safe house she'd been living in since the attack on Riverside Haven, and looked around at a life that had never quite felt real. She'd spent 3 years building this existence, the quiet civilian nurse, the woman with no past, the person who kept her head down and didn't make waves. That person was gone. Maybe she'd never really existed at all. Claire's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Saw the news? You're making a difference? Keep going. R." Rita, who'd gotten Claire's new secure number from Hayes and apparently felt the need to send encouragement at 11 p.m. Claire smiled and texted back, "Thanks. See you when I get back." She didn't know when that would be, didn't know if she'd even survive whatever was waiting in Eastern Europe. But for the first time in 3 years, she wasn't afraid of the uncertainty. She was ready for it. The next morning, Claire drove to Joint Base Lewis McCord under gray skies and persistent drizzle. She showed her credentials at the gate, followed directions to the Special Operations Training Facility, and parked in front of a nondescript building that could have been anything from a warehouse to a command center. Hayes was waiting outside, looking comfortable in combat fatigues that had clearly seen actual combat. "You made it. You sound surprised." "Little bit. Figured you might change your mind." "I did. 3 times, then I changed it back." Claire grabbed her duffel from the trunk. "Where do I report?" "Building C Medical Wing. They'll get you processed and assigned quarters. Training starts tomorrow at 0500, 5 a.m. Special Operations doesn't believe in sleeping in." Hayes grinned. "Welcome back to the military, Donovan. I'm a civilian consultant." "Sure you are." They walked together across the compound. Other soldiers moved with purpose, running in formation, conducting drills, loading gear into vehicles. It was a different world from Silvercrest Medical Center. Different language, different rhythms, different stakes. But it felt right in a way nothing had in 3 years. "You nervous?" Hayes asked. "Terrified." "Good. Means you're paying attention." He stopped outside Building C. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you're here. We need people like you. People who see what others miss and act when hesitation gets people killed." "I thought I was just a nurse." "You were never just anything." Hayes extended his hand. "See you on the other side of training, Donovan." Claire shook it. "Thanks for everything. If you hadn't pushed back that night, you'd have found another way to stop them. That's who you are." He walked away before she could argue. Claire watched him go, then turned and headed into Building C. The processing took 3 hours. Paperwork, medical screening, security clearances, equipment issue. By the time she finished, it was almost 1,400 hours, and her shoulders ached from carrying gear. Her assigned quarters were small but functional. Single room with a bed, desk, locker, and bathroom. A window overlooked the training grounds where soldiers ran obstacle courses in the rain. Claire unpacked her duffel, stowed her gear, and sat on the edge of the bed. She was tired, scared, uncertain about whether she'd made the right choice. But underneath all of that was something else, something she hadn't felt in longer than she could remember. Purpose. Not the hollow sense of going through motions. Not the performative helpfulness of civilian nursing where she could save lives but couldn't actually change anything. This was different. This was the chance to stop weapons from being developed, to prevent the next VX-7 from killing the next soldier. To use everything she'd learned, both the skills and the scars, for something that mattered. Her phone buzzed. A message from Reed. Reports came in. 2 more Meridian executives arrested today, CFO, trying to flee to Singapore. DOJ seized his passport at LAX. Your testimony is making a difference. Claire texted back, "It's good. Let me know when they set trial dates." She wouldn't be there to testify in person, would be somewhere overseas doing the work that had made her a target in the first place. But she'd given prosecutors everything they needed. Her part of that fight was done. This was the next chapter. Claire changed into PT gear and headed down to the gym. She had 2 weeks to get back in combat shape, 2 weeks to relearn skills she'd deliberately let atrophy, 2 weeks to prepare for whatever waited in Eastern Europe. It wouldn't be enough time. It never was. But she'd make it work. Because that's what she did. That's who she was. Not just a nurse. Not just a combat medic. Not just someone who followed orders or broke protocol or saved lives despite the rules. She was someone who looked at impossible situations and found a way through. Someone who refused to stay quiet when speaking up was dangerous. Someone who understood that competence wasn't something to hide. It was something to weaponize against people who counted on silence and compliance. The people who'd tried to kill her had failed. The people who'd tried to frame her had collapsed under the weight of their own corruption. The people who'd underestimated her had learned, too late, that invisible didn't mean powerless. And now Claire Donovan was done being invisible. She was going to war. Not against enemies she could see on a battlefield, against systems that profited from suffering, against weapons designed to kill invisibly, against corporate structures that insulated evil behind plausible deniability and legal disclaimers. It was going to be dangerous, probably traumatic, definitely difficult, but it was hers, and that made all the difference. 6 months later, Claire stood in a classified operations center somewhere in Germany, watching satellite feeds of a facility in Belarus burning. The raid had been successful. Hayes' team had breached, secured the chemical weapons stockpile, and extracted without casualties. The intelligence they'd gathered would lead to arrests across 3 countries and shut down an entire network of illegal weapons development. Claire had been there for all of it, had identified the nerve agent being produced, had developed the countermeasures that kept the team safe during the breach, had treated 2 soldiers exposed to trace amounts of the chemical and saved their lives in the field without access to hospital equipment or specialized medications. She was exhausted, running on 4 hours of sleep and too much coffee. Her hands were shaking from adrenaline crash. But she'd done it. They'd done it. "Good work, Donovan," Reed said, appearing at her shoulder. "Intel says this facility was supplying 3 different terrorist organizations. You just prevented attacks we'll never even hear about." "That's the job." "Yeah, it is." He paused. "You ever regret saying yes to this?" Claire thought about Silvercrest burning, about Riverside Haven under siege, about Vance and Caldwell and Cross and all the people who'd tried to bury her for being good at what she did. She thought about Sarah in Portland, being cared for by professionals funded by money seized from Meridian's accounts. About Rita still working night shifts at Silvercrest under new management that actually listened to nurses. About the 43 hostages who'd survived because Claire refused to walk away. "No," she said. "I don't regret it." "Good, because we've got another facility to hit in 3 weeks. Poland this time. Similar setup, different chemical compound." "I'll be ready." Reed nodded and walked away to coordinate the next phase of operations. Claire stayed at the monitors, watching the facility burn, thinking about all the lives saved by its destruction. Her phone buzzed. A message from Hayes. Drinks when we get back to base. You earned it. Claire smiled and texted back. You're buying. Worth every penny. She pocketed the phone and turned back to her work. There were reports to file, evidence to catalog, briefings to attend. The mission wasn't finished just because the facility was burning. But for the first time in 3 years, Claire felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Not hiding, not running, not pretending to be someone smaller and quieter and less capable than she actually was. She was Claire Donovan, combat medic, federal witness, the woman who'd looked at a billion-dollar weapons contractor and decided they didn't get to win just because they had money and lawyers and political connections. She'd been underestimated her entire career, suspended for being too competent, hunted for being too observant, threatened for being too brave. And she'd survived it all. Not because she was perfect, not because she never made mistakes or felt fear or wanted to give up, but because when the moment came to choose between silence and truth, between safety and justice, between protecting herself and protecting others, she chose the harder path, every single time. That was power. Not the kind that came from authority or weapons or institutional backing. The kind that came from refusing to be diminished. From standing up, even when standing up made you a target. From understanding that the people who wanted you quiet were afraid of exactly one thing: your voice. And Claire Donovan was done being quiet.